My daughter-in-law smiled at me for the first time in 4 years. That's how I knew something was wrong. My name is Nathan Brown. I'm 68 years old, and I've buried a wife, built a hardware business from nothing, and survived 2 heart stents. None of that scared me as much as watching Bethany walk into my kitchen with a mug in her hand and warmth in her voice. Warmth I hadn't seen from her since the day she married my son Liam. "Nathan," she said, "that cough's been dragging on too long. I made you something." 3 weeks. That's how long I had had this cough. And in 4 years of Bethany living under my roof, since she married my son Liam, she'd never once made me so much as toast. I run a small engine repair shop outside Millbrook, Ohio. 31 years in that shop. My hands are steady enough to rebuild a carburetor blind. Steady enough that when I took that mug from her, I noticed my fingers weren't shaking, but something in my gut was. "Ginger and clove," she said. "My aunt swore by it." I've heard Bethany talk about her aunt maybe twice in 4 years, never once about medicine. I drank it anyway, half of it at least. Politeness costs nothing, my father used to say, right before it costs you everything. Liam left for his shift at the plant an hour later, kissed his wife, told me to take it easy, Pop. He had no idea. Good kid, blind as a bat when it comes to that woman. That afternoon, Bethany's mother, Leah Spencer, came by, same as every Thursday, a widow with a bad hip and a good heart, bringing me tomatoes from her garden. Bethany insisted Leah try the same tea. "There's a whole thermos. Don't let it go to waste." Leah drank it like it was nothing. Grandmothers do that. Trust what's put in front of them. 40 minutes later, she was on my kitchen floor, screaming like something was tearing her apart from the inside. I've heard men scream in that shop when a jack slips and a truck comes down wrong. I've heard bad things. I had never heard anything like that. The ambulance took her. Bethany rode along, crying into her phone, telling Liam it must have been something she ate. I stood alone in my kitchen, staring at an empty mug, and for the first time in 3 weeks, my cough made a horrible kind of sense. I wasn't sick. My daughter-in-law had been dosing me.
Leah survived the night. That's the only reason I wasn't planning a funeral by Friday morning. The doctor at Millbrook General used the phrase extreme reaction to an unknown substance like it was a technical term he'd practiced saying calmly. Toxicology was still running tests. Meanwhile, Bethany was already telling the story her way, a bad batch of herbs, an honest mistake, tears right on schedule whenever somebody looked at her with sympathy in their eyes. She was good at it, I'll give her that. Good enough that if I hadn't been standing in my own kitchen when Leah hit the floor screaming, I might have believed her too. I didn't cry. I went quiet instead. 31 years running an engine shop teaches you something useful. When a part fails and everybody around you calls it wear and tear, but your gut is telling you sabotage, you don't argue with anybody. You don't announce your suspicions. You just start checking bolts, one at a time, in silence, until you find the one that was loosened on purpose. So that's what I did. Bethany told Liam she was staying at the hospital with her mother, except she wasn't. A night nurse mentioned it to me almost by accident the next morning. Bethany had left around midnight and never came back. A woman whose own mother nearly died in front of her, and she couldn't sit in a plastic chair for more than 3 hours. That detail set wrong in my stomach all day. Wrong the way a knock in an engine sits wrong. Small, but you know it's going to get worse if you ignore it. That told me most of what I needed to know. I just needed proof. I waited until the house emptied out. Liam went back to the plant because bills don't stop for family emergencies, and Bethany was running errands, which I'd learned by then was code for nobody knows where. I went up to the guest room they turned into her office, and I felt like a burglar in my own house. Told myself I had every right to be one. It's my roof, my name on the deed since 1994. Behind a stack of yoga mats shoved in the back of a closet, I found a shoebox. Not fancy, just an old shoebox from a pair of running shoes, the kind you'd never look at twice. Inside were small glass vials, maybe a dozen of them, each one labeled in tight, careful cursive. Foxglove extract, oleander concentrate, castor preparation. Words I half recognized from warning labels on yard chemicals, the kind you're told to keep locked away from kids and pets. Under the vials, wrapped in a rubber band, was a notebook, spiral bound, cheap, the kind you'd buy at a drugstore. I almost didn't open it. Some part of me already knew that once I did, there'd be no unknowing whatever was inside. I opened it anyway. It wasn't a diary, it was a log. Log. Subject shows mild fatigue, slight confusion, dosage holding steady, no suspicion noted. Cough persistent, good cover, keep using it, increase concentration slightly in the next batch. Mother-in-law visits create complications with timeline. Consider accelerating before her Thursday visit.
Mother-in-law. That's not what Bethany called Leah out loud, sweet as pie at every family dinner. That's what she called her on paper, cold as an invoice. Then, the last page, ink still fresh, like it had been written that same week. NB, cough provides perfect excuse. Finish before Liam's promotion review. Clean timing. No questions asked afterward. NB. My initials. Nathan Brown. I sat down hard on the edge of that bed because my knees stopped agreeing to hold me up. 31 years running a shop, I've never lost a finger. I've outlived men twice my size and half my age, men who thought steel and bad luck could take me down before old age did. And I nearly got put in the ground by a woman who smiled at me twice a year and made me tea exactly once. I took my phone out, hands steady, steadier than they had any business being, and I photographed every page, every vial label, every ugly little sentence she'd written about me like I was a lab experiment instead of her husband's father. Then I put everything back exactly the way I found it, box angle and all. She couldn't know I'd been in here. Not yet. Not until I had somewhere safe to put what I knew. Downstairs, my phone buzzed. Liam. Good news, Pop. Leah's stable. She's talking. Doctors think full recovery. I should have felt only relief reading that. I did feel some. But underneath it was something colder. Because a woman who documents dosages like a chemist keeping lab notes doesn't quit just because her first attempt went sideways. She adjusts. She learns. She tries again, smarter. I called an old friend from my plant days, Dominic Burks, retired police, doing private security work 2 towns over now, the kind of man who still checks his mirrors out of habit. Told him I needed to talk tonight, in person, and it couldn't wait until morning. He texted back in 4 minutes. On my way. I was still staring at those 3 words when I heard tires crunch on my gravel driveway. Too early to be Dominic. I looked out the kitchen window. Bethany's car. Pulling in slow, careful, like she had all the time in the world, a fresh thermos sitting on the passenger seat beside her purse. She was already smiling before she'd even opened the car door. Dominic wasn't due for another 20 minutes. Bethany was already walking up my porch steps with that thermos and that smile, and I had a choice to make in about 4 seconds. Confront her now, alone, or play along until backup arrived. I've fixed enough engines to know you don't yank a part loose while the whole machine's still running hot. You wait for the right moment. So I opened the door before she could knock, and I smiled back. "Nathan," she said, stepping past me into the kitchen like she owned the place. I felt terrible leaving things the way I did. I made a better batch, gentler this time. I think I got the ratio wrong yesterday. Got the ratio wrong, like she was talking about pancake batter, not whatever put her own mother in a hospital bed screaming. "That's kind of you," I said, and the words tasted like copper in my mouth. She set the thermos down on my counter, the same counter my late wife Evie used to roll dough on 30 years ago, and started pouring like she had all the time in the world. I watched her hands, steady, practiced, a woman who's done this before, more than once, more than just on me. "How's your mother?" I asked. "Stable." She didn't look up from the mug. "Talking, apparently, confused about what happened, but stable." Confused about what happened. I wondered if that worried her, Leah waking up with questions nobody wanted asked. I keep thinking. I eased into a chair at the table, keeping my voice slow and tired, an old man's voice. Maybe we ought to just stick to what the doctor gives me, antibiotics or whatever, skip the herbs for a while. Her hand paused over the mug for half a second. Half a second is nothing to most people. To a man who spent 31 years listening for the one bad sound in a running engine, half a second is an alarm bell. "The doctor's medicine hasn't worked in 3 weeks," she said, smooth again. "This will. Trust me." Trust me, from the woman whose notebook called me a subject. She brought the mug over and set it in front of me, and up close I could smell it, bitter, sharp, wrong in a way 3 weeks of cold medicine had almost trained me not to notice anymore. I thought about every cup I'd already swallowed, every night I'd gone to bed a little more tired than the one before, chalking it up to being 68 and stubborn about seeing a real doctor. Drink it while it's hot. Works best that way. I picked up the mug. My hand didn't shake, which surprised me, because everything underneath my skin was shaken plenty. "Bethany," I said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Your mother's tea, the first batch, what exactly went into that?" Something shifted behind her eyes. Small, but I caught it, the way you catch a hairline crack in a windshield before it spreads. "Same as this one. Herbs. Nothing dangerous." "Because the hospital's running tests, toxicology. They'll know exactly what went into her by tomorrow, won't they? Down to the milligram." The mug was still in my hand. I hadn't drunk from it. I set it back down, slow, deliberate, and I watched 29 years of practiced sweetness drain right out of her face like water out of a cracked radiator. "Why would that worry you if it's just herbs?" "Bethany," her voice dropped, quiet and hard now, nothing gentle left in it. "Drink the tea." "I don't think I will." For a long moment, neither of us moved. The kitchen clock ticked. Somewhere outside, a dog barked twice and went quiet, and I understood, sitting there, that I was alone in a house with a woman who'd already tried to kill me once and had a fresh batch 3 feet from my hand, and Dominic was still 15 minutes out. "You went through my things." Not a question, a fact she'd just worked out, watching my face the same way I'd been watching hers. I didn't answer, didn't need to. Bethany's hand moved toward the mug, like she meant to force the issue, tip it toward my mouth if she had to. I've unloaded steel engine blocks off a truck bed with these hands. I closed mine around her wrist before the mug ever left the counter. "Sit down," I said, quiet, final, the voice I used to use on grown men who thought they could walk off with parts they hadn't paid for. She sat. Outside, gravel crunched under tires again. Headlights swept across my kitchen window. Not Liam's truck, something unfamiliar, slower, more careful. Bethany's eyes went to the window, then back to me, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw something close to fear crack through that smile she'd worn like armor for 4 straight years. "Who's that?" I didn't answer her. I just watched the driveway, waiting to see who was going to walk through my door next, and hoping to God it was Dominic and not someone Bethany had called first.
The headlights cut off. A car door shut, easy, unhurried. Not the way Dominic moves. He's retired police, but he still gets out of a car like he's clearing a room. This was slower, careless. Then I heard Liam's voice through the screen door. "Whose truck is that out front, Bethany?" "My son, home 3 hours early." Bethany's whole body changed in that second, spine straight, chin up, the mask sliding back into place so fast I almost admired the skill of it. She yanked a wrist out of my grip and I let her go, because there wasn't any version of this where I wanted Liam walking in to find his father wrestling his wife over a mug of tea. "In here," she called out, voice bright as a new dime. Nathan wasn't feeling well again. Liam came through the kitchen door still in his work boots, a grease smear on his arm form, looking between the two of us with the confused half-smile of a man who has no idea he's standing in the middle of something. 29 years old, and still that same open face he had as a boy, the one that trusted everybody until proven wrong. "Pop, you okay?" he said. I looked at that thermos on the counter. I looked at my son, and I made the decision I'd been circling around since I found that shoebox in the closet. I wasn't going to spring this on him half-cocked, with Bethany standing right there to spin it into something smaller than it was. She was too good at that. I'd watched her do it for 4 years. "Just tired," I said. Bethany was kind enough to bring by more of her tea. Liam's face relaxed, relieved, the way it always did whenever the two of us were in the same room with visible tension. "See, Pop, told you she's been worried sick about you." Bethany reached over and squeezed his hand, and I watched my son lean into that touch like a plant leaning toward the only light it's ever known. Outside, a second set of headlights swung into the driveway. This time, the engine cut, and the door opened with that same unhurried confidence I'd been waiting for. Dominic. He came up the porch steps in a windbreaker, 61 years old and built like he still did push-ups every morning, because he did. Liam opened the door before he could knock. "Help you?" Liam said, polite, a little wary. Nobody in Millbrook gets 2 unexpected visitors in one evening without wondering why. "Dominic Burks," he said, hand out. "Old friend of your dad's. He asked me to stop by tonight." Bethany's eyes cut to me, sharp, and I could see her running the math. A retired cop showing up the same night I'd confronted her over that tea. She wasn't stupid. That was always the problem with her. Stupid people I could have handled months ago. "Pop, what's going on?" Liam asked me, looking at me now, really looking, the way he used to when he was a boy and knew I was about to tell him something he didn't want to hear, a dog that wasn't coming home, a job that hadn't worked out. I thought about Evie, gone 11 years now, and how she used to say the hardest part of loving somebody is telling them the truth when a lie would be so much kinder in the moment. She was right. She usually was. "Sit down, son," I said. "There's some things you need to see." "Nathan," Bethany said, and for the first time that night her voice cracked just slightly, just enough that I heard the fear underneath the performance. "Don't do this. Not like this." "Do what?" Liam looked between us again, faster now, some part of him finally catching up to the wrongness in the room. "Somebody tell me what's happening." I took my phone out of my pocket. 31 photographs sat in that camera roll. Vials, handwriting, dosages, my own initials scrawled next to the word finish. I'd looked at them so many times over the last 2 days that I had whole pages memorized. I still wasn't ready to show my son. There's no such thing as ready for this. "Dominic, maybe you ought to explain. Might sound better coming from somebody who isn't family." Dominic nodded once, calm, professional, the same voice he probably used delivering bad news for 30 years on the force. "Liam, I think you should sit down." "I don't want to sit down. I want somebody to tell me what's going on." Bethany's hand found the counter behind her, steadying herself. And in that moment, right before Dominic opened his mouth to start explaining, she did something I didn't expect. She reached for the thermos, fast, and knocked it straight off the counter. It hit the tile floor and shattered, dark liquid spreading out fast across the white tile like something spilling out of a wound, and for half a second, all 4 of us just stood there and stared at it, the only physical proof in the room, disappearing into the grout lines right in front of us.
Nobody moved for a second. The tea kept spreading across my kitchen tile, dark and quiet, disappearing into the grout the way evidence has a way of doing when you're not fast enough. Dominic moved first. 31 years on the force teaches a man not to freeze. He had his phone out and a photo of the spill taken before the puddle even stopped spreading. "That's fine," he said, calm as still water. We don't need the liquid. We've got what we need already. Bethany's face went white as the tile under her feet. Somebody tell me what's happening, Liam said again, and this time his voice cracked on the last word, the way a boy's voice cracks, not a grown man's. 29 years old, and I watched him age 5 in about 10 seconds. I didn't hand him my phone. I walked over and sat him down at the table myself, the same table he'd eaten breakfast at every morning of his childhood, and I put my hand on his shoulder before I let Dominic show him the photographs. I watched my son's face while he looked. I've seen men get bad news in that shop, a diagnosis, a foreclosure notice, a call about a wife or a kid. I'd never seen anything hit a person the way those photographs hit Liam. Foxglove, oleander, dosages, his mother's initials. No, mine, sitting next to the word finish, like a work order. This isn't real, he said, quiet, then louder. This isn't real. Tell me this isn't real. Bethany hadn't moved from the counter. Liam, baby, I can explain. Explain what? He was on his feet now, and I'd never once in 29 years heard my son's voice hit that pitch. Explain why you've got a notebook full of dosages for my father? Explain why my mother-in-law nearly died on our kitchen floor? I love you, she said, and God help her. I think in whatever twisted arithmetic she'd built her life on, she believed that was true. Everything I did so we could finally have a life that was ours. He was always in the way, Liam, always watching, always judging, always making you choose. He's my father. Liam's voice broke apart on the word father. You wanted me to choose between loving my dad and being married to a woman who was poisoning him? Dominic stepped in then, steady, procedural, the way I imagined he'd done 100 times before retirement. Mrs. Chambers, I need you to sit down. Millbrook PD is on their way. Given the evidence, given your mother's hospitalization, this is going to be a formal investigation into attempted murder. Something in Bethany finally broke, right there in my kitchen, 29 years of careful performance collapsing into something raw and ugly. You don't understand what it's like, she said, to nobody, to all of us. Watching somebody hold all the control, watching them never trust you, never really let you in. I let you into my home, I said. First words I'd spoken since Liam sat down. 4 years, my roof, my table, and you were writing dosages in a notebook the whole time. She didn't answer that. It wasn't an answer. The squad car pulled into the driveway 11 minutes later. No sirens, just red and blue washing quiet across my living room curtains. 2 officers, calm and professional, and Bethany went with them without much fight left in her. The fight had drained out somewhere between the shattered thermos and her own husband's face. Liam didn't watch her go. He sat at my kitchen table with his head in his hands, and I sat down across from him, and for a long while neither one of us said anything at all. Just the sound of the grandfather clock in the hall, same clock that had ticked through Evie's illness, through Liam's whole childhood, through every ordinary Tuesday this house had ever seen. I should have seen it, he finally said. So should I told him. She fooled us both. That's not weakness, son. That's just how good liars work. 3 weeks later, the toxicology report came back on Leah and me. 8 months. That's how long I'd been slowly poisoned without knowing it. 8 months of a cough that was never going to clear up on its own, that was nothing but Bethany's hand on the dial, turning it up a little at a time. Leah's accidental dose likely saved my life, forcing everything into daylight months before it would have otherwise. Leah and I sit together most Thursdays now, same as she used to visit before all this, except now we talk honestly about the years we both spent explaining away a woman who was never who she pretended to be. Liam moved back into his old room for a while. Dominic tells me the case is about as airtight as they come. Handwriting, toxicology, the vials themselves. Bethany's looking at 20 years, maybe more. There's one thing Dominic told me that I haven't told Liam yet. Records from Bethany's life before Millbrook, a town 2 states over, a man who died young of what was ruled natural causes at the time. Dominic's making calls, asking questions that town never thought to ask. I don't know yet what those answers will be, but I've learned something these last few weeks. The people who hurt us rarely do it just once, and rarely do it just to one person. For now, my cough is gone, my kitchen is quiet, and for the first time in 8 months, I'm sleeping through the night without wondering if I'll wake up.